Part of your homework was to turn in 122, which was the circuit over the real basic integration. But if you did not put that in Google Classroom, you can still get full points for it, but I do need it now with your name on it, so come put it in the basket, please. And then today we're going to do we're going to talk about some of the statistics stuff that I shared last time, so I'm going to do that pretty quickly because I want to hit that a few times before we get to the AP exam. We're going to do one practice FRQ, so that's one of the handouts y'all picked up. I did put an optional one on the back page, so you'll need to make sure that you're doing the right one.
Oh, I lost my paper, so I did on notebook paper.
That's fine. So we're going to work one practice FRQ, and then the other two pages that you've got make up handout 129. And that one is called Topics That Will Be on the AP Exam. So just a couple topics that I am sure will be there because they ask it every year. And I want to just do some quick review of that. And this is the first one. There's a couple more, and we'll get to as many of them as we have time for before the AP exam. But of course, that's sneaking up pretty quick. Get to see you guys 3 times this week because it's a B week. And next week I see you 2 times, but if you have an AP exam on Tuesday of next week or Thursday of next week, then that's going to limit that. Y'all just like?
I was paying my library dues, so I had everything on.
So I can graduate.
Okay, and then with the extra time that you have, I gave you a circuit last class and asked you to start on it if you had time, and I'm going to ask that you work on it some more today, but it's still not due next class. So, yes, sir.
I don't think I got that circuit. 127.
Okay, I'll get it for you in a bit. Just remind me. Okay, so I shared the same stuff with you guys last time, but I'm going to go through it a little bit quicker and just kind of highlight why I put it on here. So pass rates for Fayetteville High School the last several years. Main thing I want you to see out of this is that, I know you're all smart. I know you're all capable of passing the AP exam, but if you do not study some and if you do not come prepared on the AP day or the AP test day to really give your best effort, then some of you will barely miss it. So it's definitely not an automatic. Worldwide pass rates are pretty similar, pretty consistent as well. So main thing with this one is if you start your AP test in a couple weeks and it seems easy, that doesn't mean that you should relax. It could be that it's easier for everybody, and it could mean that the pass score is going to be higher that year. Likewise, if it seems really hard, if you just give up, then that's pretty much the only way you're going to fail yourself. If it's hard for you, it's probably hard for other people, but the numbers are pretty consistent since it's scaled with. So from the workshop that I did a couple years ago, one of the guys that works, he's like one of the main scorers for the AP test. So again, this is a couple years old, but I imagine that it's true or fairly true every year. He had said half of the people who scored 2 the previous year would have gotten a 3 if they only had 3 more points. So 3 points would be 3 multiple choice or about 1 part of a FRQ. So next to nothing. And honestly, a lot of times that's just like a matter of checking your work and being sure that you're using the calculator as much as you're allowed to and all that kind of stuff. That year you needed 11 points to go from a 2 to a 4. So 11 points is a handful of questions, but it's not that many. If you're doing something in the calculator, make sure you write that down in an FRQ. That is considered showing your work. Any explanation, justification that's more than a sentence is probably on the wrong track. And you're welcome to stop as soon as you have a numerical answer. You don't have to do any numerical arithmetic. He, according to him, and again, this could have changed, and obviously it's not guaranteed, but he said one of them is always one of the area geometric graphs. We've practiced a bunch of those already. He claims that one FRQ is always a rate in, rate out type of FRQ, and that's the type we're going to practice here in just a moment. Should always round to 3 decimal places unless you are told differently, which almost never happens. And then sometimes there's a few points hidden behind knowing that differentiable functions are also continuous. So anytime you see that a function is differentiable in the directions, you should just say that it's continuous. And if you didn't need it, it didn't hurt you. It only takes 5 seconds to write that down, but sometimes you do need that. Okay, last time I did not put any reasons down to pass the AP exam, but I plan on, that doesn't mean that there's not any, but okay, let's not do view only. Okay, so all I want from you guys is what would be a reason or two that you would want to pass the AP exam?
So you don't have to take any college.
Okay. I would think that would probably be the main reason for a lot of people. And I'm not telling y'all right or wrong, I'm just... part of it is I'm just kind of curious what your motivations are, and then again, if we look at this a few different class periods, then if I think there's something glaring that you're missing, then I have to take calculus 1 in college. Okay, what else? Is that the only reason to pass the AP test?
Well, if you put in all your effort into passing the class, then like, if you're not trying to pass the exam.
Okay, so you want all your effort from throughout the year to show results on the AP exam. Is that close enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Academic validation.
Okay. Those two kind of go hand in hand. Anything else?
So that my mother is not disappointed.
Okay. So my family disappointed. Okay, anything else? Okay. I'm just interested. I mean, 6th period will add something to that, hopefully, and then maybe y'all will think of something else, and then if I think you're missing something, I'm going to tell you when we get closer to the AP exam. Okay, so let's look at 128 for just a second. That is the one that is an FRQ on the front and an FRQ on the back. These are both what are considered rate in, rate out, which on the slideshow we just went over, the guy who did the workshop that works closely with College Board that does AP grading, like not just an AP grader, but like he's one of the lead graders, said that this is always one of the FRQs. So there's 2 of them on here. We're only going to do 1 of them. I just put a second one on here because it didn't take more paper, and I was just trying to make it convenient for you if you wanted to practice an extra one. So, okay, should I free-hole punch it or did y'all? Okay, good. So then you should know what the front one is. 2002 FRQ2 is the one I would like you to try. And this is number 2, so this is a calculator question. You definitely need a calculator. In fact, I think I'm going to give you a calculator tip that I bet none of you know once you're done. But to really kind of hit home how helpful it could be, I'm not going to tell you beforehand. But like we've been doing, again, I want you to give it a full 15 minutes. If you have extra time, see if you need to add explanation, see if you can check arithmetic, see if you typed it in your calculator correctly. I'm only asking you to do one with your best effort, so. Alright, so go ahead and start now. When it's up, I will share the answers and the scoring, and we can talk about the math on any part that you would like to. This one is kind of wordy, so. Here's that circuit you're asking about. A few people started on it that we're done with the other stuff. But most people don't have much of it. Right? 15 minutes. Alright, so let's look at your scoring, and then I will give you a calculator tip that might help you out. I do feel like this one is kind of hard to do in 15 minutes because there's so much you had to type in your calculator, but we can talk about that after the scoring. Okay, so part A, and I did try to look up the average of this one, but College Board had it linked to the 2003 FRQs instead of the 2002, so they just have it mislinked, and I couldn't figure it out. So, but part A already has 3 points. I feel like all 3 of these points shouldn't be too bad. So they give you 1 point for the limits if you did 9 to 17. It's very easy to say 0 to 17 because that's usually what it is. But in this question, it said that it started at t equals 9. So give yourself a point if you had that correct. 1 part if you had the integrand correct, which would be that you were integrating e of t dt. And to get the 3rd point right, you had to type it in your calculator correctly, or remember that your calculator could do that, or remember that this was a calculator question. Well, they did ask you to round to the nearest whole number since it represented people. 6,004 got you the 3rd point. Okay, we okay with that? Okay. My guess would be on part B. I probably spent quite a bit of time on here, and based on their scoring, my guess is that probably a lot of people really struggled with part B and getting the correct answer in part B. So sometimes they make some adjustments after they see that. So part B was only worth 1 point, and it was just for this setup. Basically $15 times the number of people that enter between 9 and 17, and then $11 for everybody that enters from 17 to 23. Okay, or I guess you could do it this way. Since you know how many they started with, or you know how much there was at a certain time, I guess you could just do some of the part of the integration. You okay with that? Okay. Did y'all get that as an answer? The 104,000? Got that far? Nice. Okay, part C had several different things asking for it, so 3 points. Somewhere in there you needed the derivative of h at 17. So I found the derivative of h, which was the fundamental theorem of calculus, and then plugged that in. So it ended up being e of 17 minus L of 17, which gives you that. So that's the point. Then the other 2 points came from the 2 meanings. So h of 17 is like how many people were in the park at time t equals 17. That was given to you. They're just asking you to interpret what it meant. And then the 3rd point came from h prime of 17, which represents the rate that people were entering the park. So they were entering the park at negative 380 people per hour, or you could say it was decreasing at 380 people per hour. And if you don't refer to t equals 17 in any of your work, then they take away a point. So it'd be pretty hard not to refer to that one though.
What about if we just said at 5 p.m. because they specified it?
Instead of t equals 17?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. That's the same thing. Okay. Okay with the scoring on that one? And then the last question was, when was there a max? So when I saw that, I did a candidates test. I tested the endpoints, which was, what, like 9 and 23 or something? or that's the endpoints. How many people were there at t equals 9? 0, because it's when it first opened. How many people were in there at t equals 23? Well, you had to use this. That would be e of 23 minus l of 23. So basically, how many people have entered by that time, subtract how many people have left. And I don't remember what that number was. But then you also, so that's the endpoints, you also have to test critical numbers. So this is why they're setting the derivative equal to 0. That's how you find critical numbers. The derivative of h of t, which you should have done in part C, would be e of t minus l of t. So personally, the way I did it is I graphed e of t as one graph in my calculator, and l of t as one graph in my calculator, and I figured out where those two things were equal. Like if you solve this, if you add one of them over, and then that gave me the critical number, which was 15.7945. I don't remember. But it didn't ask how many people were the max, it asked when. So that was all I needed for the last point. So, calculus aside, what do you think is, or what was the hardest part of this for you, just logistically? Were you okay with using your calculator? Yep.
Question. So like, you know where it says like E, T or whatever,
Uh-huh.
like that's the equation. If you put it in the actual equation, would they count you off? Like do you need to put,
Mm-mm.
okay.
No. The only problem is if you write down what E of t is, and then you write down what L of t is, and you don't copy it down right, then you lost the point.
Okay.
So it's
easier.
quicker and it's safer to just refer to the ones they have named. Okay, well, again, I think this one's tough to do in 15 minutes, but did you type in E of t in your calculator for part A? You like had to type that function in here to type the stuff in? Okay, that's not that uncommon. But then did you have to type it in at least once more for part B, if not 2 more times? Same function. And then part C, if you got it right, you had to type in all of E of t again with 17 plugged in, and all of L of t for the first time all plugged in. So this is like the 3rd or 4th time you had to type in E of t. And then down here, if you did it with graphing the way I did this, you had to type in E of t a 4th or 5th time and L of t a 2nd time. Did y'all feel like you were typing in the same function a bunch of times? Okay, so this is on to the calculator tip I want to give to you. And again, I don't think any of you will know how to do this, but if you go to graph, and let's say I type in E of t in for this one. And you can use parentheses, or you can find the big fraction under alpha y equals. Okay, so there's E of t. Does that look okay? And then here's L of t. So what I did in this question, and partly because I knew that I was going to have to type these in a bunch, because I think I did this one years ago, I typed them in one time, one of them for y1 and one of them for y2, and I double checked that I typed them in correctly. Okay. That's all you have to do. You only have to type them in once if you're doing it this way. So then I did part A, and I said, let me integrate from 9 to 17. But instead of typing out all of E of t, because I already did that, I stored it in for y1 on the graph. If you do that, if you go to this button here for variables and go over to the 2nd tab, and then option 1 for function, you can select these y1, y2, y3, etc. So when you do that, it's pulling that equation that you typed in for y1, and I don't have to type it in a bunch of times. It just goes to what's typed in there. So that way I only had to type e of t in once, and I just called it y1 in my calculator, and I only typed in L of t once and called it y2 in my calculator. So as long as you know that you can do that, and that those are under variables, second tab, function, then it makes it where you're not typing in the same thing 5 times for one FRQ. So, did anybody know that about your calculators? You did? Did your like algebra teacher show you that, or did you just know on your own?
No, I figured out the Khan Academy thing with a help video.
Oh, they did it in Khan Academy video? That's nice. Okay, so any math questions y'all want to ask about this one? I know I touched on just a little bit of it in the scoring, but yes.
Can you show us how to find the clinical number on the calculator?
Sure. So since are you okay with how to find h of t or h prime?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So once I knew what h prime was, critical numbers are when the first derivative are 0 or undefined. So that would be when this function minus this function equals 0, or I could add it over and see where they're equal. So I graphed these two, and then I graphed from 9 to 23, because I think those are the numbers, and I graphed from like 0 to 2000 or something. And so there is e of t, there's L of t. Subtracting those, or when they're equal, would be when that equation's true. So I just found this intersection. That's your lunch bell. And then down there. Sorry, if that's too rushed, we can talk about it after lunch.
I think I missed I switched to room matches.
Okay, to finish up our topic here, was there anything else from this FRQ that y'all wanted to ask about? Any math parts? Why the stuff works the way it works? Okay, I will remind you, a couple classes ago I gave you all 6 of last year's FRQs, and if you remember I gave you some time to pick out the one that you wanted to do, and the one that was the lowest average was one that you guys thought was the easiest, or looked the easiest at first glance. And remember, that was because we had practiced several of those in the last couple weeks. So if this rate in, rate out type of question feels difficult to you, then you probably need to practice some more of this before the AP exam. I will try to give you some more practice on it, but there's some other things that I think you need to look at. So just to be clear, I said this before lunch, but one more time, the back of it is optional, but but it is another rate in, rate out. So if you know you need to practice another one of those or more of those, I tried to make at least one of them convenient for you. But let's move on to the other handout you picked up, the one that's called Topics That Will Be on the AP Exam. So of course I don't know everything that's going to be on there. Some stuff shows up once every 5 years. Some stuff is not predictable. Some stuff has some twists and turns to it. But the ones we're going to look at today, and this will be part of your reviewing for homework, is we're going to look at solving differential equations. So I'm going to do another one of these with you that you can just follow along and copy down and participate that way. And then there'll be one or two of them that I want you to go back and do. So we're going to do that with solving differential equations, the definition of a derivative, and the alternate form of a derivative. So we've not practiced those in forever. The derivative of trig functions and using them for derivatives and integration, Riemann sums and trapezoidal sums, and implicit differentiation. So those are the topics that I can promise you will be on the AP exam. So of course, if you feel solid about all of these, then you go into the AP exam knowing that you're going to get a handful of points, which of course goes a long way to getting you to the score that you want to get to. Okay, so the one I'm going to do on solving differential equations, so you only have to follow along and copy down what I'm copying down. But also please interrupt me and ask questions if you need to, because there's another one of them that I'm going to ask you to do on your own here in just a bit. Also, I didn't document these very well, but these are released questions, so I don't remember what year it was, but question 37 some year, this is what was on the AP exam. So they give us dy dx is 4y, and we're supposed to figure out what y is equal to. So this would be what we talked about, the separation of variables thing, where you try to get all the y stuff on one side, so divide both sides by y, and multiply both sides by dx. And then remember we did that so that if we were to integrate both sides, the left stuff is just in terms of y, and the right stuff is just in terms of x. Don't forget your plus c. Some multiple choice questions you're never going to forget the plus c because it has it in all the choices, but in a question like this you need it. Then we had to use this initial condition. So when y is 4, x was 0. And then once we knew what c was, we could plug that back in. And then how did we go about solving this for y equals in the end? What came next? Some way to get rid of this natural log here. Okay, this was when this is where y'all need to put some sort of note on your paper then. Exponentiate both sides. So this becomes e to the log base e of the absolute value of y. So all that becomes the absolute value of y. This we can split up with multiplication. When you multiply things with the same base, that's like adding the exponents. And then for the same reason, this is the absolute value of y. This is going to be 4. E to the log base e of 4 is just going to be 4. So put the 4 here. And then to know if this answer is supposed to be equal to this or the opposite version of it, well, one, it's multiple choice, so that kind of helps, because there's only one of them. But to be sure if it's equal to 4e to the 4x or equal to the negative version of that, the way to get rid of the absolute value sign, you need to test this initial condition again. If I plug in 0 for x, y is supposed to be 4. If I plug 0 in for x, looks like y does equal 4. So that confirms that. So not only should you have a multiple choice question about this. Oftentimes this shows up on FRQs, and just like when we were in this unit, I bugged you to death about when it shows up on an FRQ. It is often 5 to 6 points. So very, very, very good skill to go into the AP exam being prepared for. Okay, so do you have any math questions about this, or do you need any more time to copy down for that example? You remember most of that? Okay. Then for question 2, I will share the answer with you. The answer that I got. But once we do one of each of these, I am going to go back and ask you to try the ones we're skipping. So question 2 is the same type of question. I told you where it came from, and that should be your answer. So when you work it, if you don't come up with that answer, then that's where you need to go back in your binder or drop in during advisory or something. Okay, second skill we're going to review is the definition of a derivative. So where a derivative comes from. And for this, you have to have 2 things memorized. You have to have the standard formal definition of a derivative, the limit as h approaches 0 of f of x plus h minus f of x all over h, and the alternate form. They put both of these on there. So I know I've been putting this on the when you see this is what you do quizzes, but of course working it in this direction can be a little more difficult depending on the question. So first example here is number 6 from some year. So when I compare this to these two, it looks much more like the standard definition, just the formatting of it, because there's the denominator kind of gives that away. So I can tell by looking at this, it looks like if this is supposed to be where the function is, it looks like the function is 8x to the 8th, and they're evaluating at 1/2. So because all of this type of limit setup is really just one way to ask for derivatives, you would want to find the derivative of this with power rule, and then because of this 1/2, they're evaluating it at 1/2. So if you plug that in, you get 64 times, well, 2 to the 7th, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, but it is 1/2, so this would be 1 over 128, which reduces to 1/2. So I know you can do that derivative. I know you can plug in 1/2. The number gets a little bit big there, but without a calculator. But you have to have these memorized, and you have to see how focusing on this part helps you know what the function is, so that you can take his derivative and then plug in that x value. Okay, anything you can think of about that one you would like to ask? Okay, so in a few minutes I'm going to come back and ask you to do the next 2 of these, and same thing, I will share the answers with you. They are E and D, so you need to make sure that you have the work that matches with that. So feel free to jot those answers out to the side. I want you to know if you're doing it correctly. Okay, on the next page, reminding you, also several, I'm not going to talk about this a lot, but some of these like specific skills, if you know that you struggle with this and 1 more problem or 2 more problems is really not enough, you know you need to practice a lot, I did try to put some bit.ly links in there that take you to the Khan Academy practice for that. Okay, you do need to know the derivative of trig functions for derivatives and integration. So it doesn't mean that this is hard or anything. It's just I know you guys use a couple of these a lot, and a couple of these you don't use very much. But all 6 are fair game for the test. So if this was a function, his derivative, the derivative of x would be 1, and the derivative of sine would be cosine. So that's a pretty easy one, because no one knows derivatives. Now, for the one I'm going to ask you to do, you're going to have to integrate. So you're still going to be using these, but it will take you a couple more steps. This one, number 2, should be D in the end. Again, I don't want to see the answer D. I want you to show me the work that leads to D. Okay, moving on. Trapezoidal sums and Riemann sums. So area of a triangle, base times height, length times width, whatever you want to call it. Not as important to me, but for trapezoid, this one is important. It's the height times the bases added together, all divided by 2. This is kind of an obscure example, but the first year of COVID, where you guys were out of school the last couple months, that AP exam was a little bit different. They had like 2 humongous FRQs. Like the FRQs had like 20 parts to them or something, and they didn't expect people to even finish them, but just give lots of opportunities. But that year, I actually got to see students work on paper, because it was all digital, it was all virtual, and there was one student, when I added his up, that I think he would have passed, except on when he was doing area of a trapezoid, he was not consistent. Like sometimes he used the formula correctly for like the first one, but then sometimes he like would put a minus sign instead of a plus sign. So even though it seems obvious that you need to know the area of a trapezoid to be able to do trapezoidal sums, you know, if you don't memorize it right, then you're going to leave some points on the table. So question 91, to give you an example of this, looks like this one was a left-hand Riemann sum with 3 subdivisions of equal length. So I look at it like this, and I draw something similar on my paper even when I work them, but I give myself a visual of the 3 rectangles, and since this was rectangles, it's just length, plus length times width, plus length times width, plus length times width. So it looks like this guy has a length of 2, 2, and 2. It did say that they were equal, but because this is left-hand Riemann sum, I would be taking the y value on the left side for the first rectangle, the y value on the left side of the second rectangle, and then the y value on the left side of the third rectangle. So the answer comes from 10 plus 4 plus 16, or $30. I don't know, I've just got 20 in my head, but 30. Looks like the one I will ask you to try was a trapezoidal sum. So along the same line, so 3 of them, add them up. You can do the area of 1, you can do the area of 3. You just need to be careful. So same thing, I do want to see your work for that when you work it out, but I will share the answer to that one should be C. So if you don't get C, that's where you need to ask me to step in and help. Okay, and then there is one more on the next page, and then one more topic I want you to review. On the next page, this was part of an FRQ. So I do want you to think about this one, but same thing. I'm going to share the answer with you because I want you to know if you're on the right track or not. So this represented the average temperature of the tea from 0 minutes to 10 minutes. So when you work it, make sure that you get something similar. Okay, and then the last topic that I want to make sure that you I'm sorry, everyone have that written down? Okay, last topic that I want to ask you to buckle down and make sure that you start practicing it if you need to is implicit differentiation. So that would be when you're taking the derivative of something with a bunch of x's and y's in it, and we're taking the derivative with respect to x. So x squared would be 2x, and I just took the derivative of x with respect to x, but since these are the same, we don't need to keep up with them. It's like multiplying by 1. But then over here, to do x times y, we would have to do product rule. So take the derivative of x with y left alone, and then the derivative of y with x left alone. And because I'm taking the derivative of y, you have to have this y prime. That's what makes it implicit differentiation. Okay, and then y to the third, you just do product rule. But again, you have to realize that you just took the derivative of y with respect to some other variable, so you need a y prime there. If you move over the stuff that doesn't have a y prime to the other side, subtract it over. If you factor out a y prime as the GCF, and then you can undo times with divide. All of these questions have a very similar feel to them. So in the end, that ended up being choice A. So again, some stuff comes and goes, some stuff is not tested every year. Implicit is absolutely going to be in your test. Sometimes it's like this as a multiple choice. It was number 13, whatever year this came from. And then sometimes it shows up as an FRQ. So the one I want you to do is like this. And I don't need to share the answer with you because they give you the answer when it shows up on an FRQ. They tell you what it's supposed to equal, and it's your job to show that it's the same as that. Okay, so any questions about that part? Okay, then go ahead and pick, I guess you don't have to go back to the very first one, but I do want you to go back and try the ones that we skipped to make sure that you're getting the answers that I shared with you. And your homework, in addition to finishing this, practicing the couple that we skipped, this will be where your mini quiz next class will come from. So I'll pick 1 or 2, not more than 2 for sure, questions, and they will be of these type. So maybe solving a differential equation like number 1 or 2, maybe using the definition of a derivative, maybe using the derivative of trig functions for derivatives or integration, a Riemann sum or a trapezoidal sum, or an implicit differentiation. Again, you're certainly encouraged to practice some more stuff outside of class. As far as our time is concerned, there are certain things that you just have to be getting down if you had forgotten. So that would be these for now. And the U substitution circuit is still not going to be due next class, but if you finish this 129 and you have some class time, you might want to try to do a few more questions. And I'm going to get these homeworks put in real quick, and then I'll come around and help.
Bless you.
Would you have the other one of these? This is the one you didn't have. I agree with this one, so I'm gonna give that back to you. You should know what it looks like. There you go. Okay, if you guys are seeing any questions you might want me to look at with you, just call me over at the time.
you're down to about 5 minutes, so you might finish up what you're on. Make sure you know what your homework is. Finish up the rest of those on 129. Come in for advisory if you need help getting the answers that I shared with you, and be prepared for a 1 or 2 question mini quiz that will be topics on that page. Questions will not come from any topics outside of that page. I will also collect the 129 and see that you did finish the rest of those questions. It is open in Google Classroom if you want to turn it in early.